Welcome to Random Flyer, the channel that brings you the true stories of New Zealand's airline history. Today, we're looking at Air New Zealand's Douglas DC-8 fleet, the aircraft that carried the airline into the jet age, opened new long-range routes, and established Air New Zealand on the world stage. Following service with Air New Zealand, some were broken up and some crashed, but some were involved in shootouts or were impounded for drug running. These are their stories. The Douglas DC-8 was developed in the 1950s as the company's answer to the de Havilland Comet and the Boeing 707. Air New Zealand, then known as Tasman Empire Airways Limited or TEAL, was looking for a replacement for the turboprop Lockheed L188 Electras that was flying on its regional routes, and was looking for larger pure jet airliners to expand its network. The company looked at the Boeing 707-138 shortbody that had been ordered by Qantas, the Convair 880, and after some political lobbying, the elegant but over-engineered Vickers VC-10 and an offer by BOAC to lease surplus de Havilland Comet 4s to begin interim jet services, and finally, Douglas DC-8. Eventually they selected the DC-8 Series 52 powered by four Pratt & Whitney JT3D-3B turbofan engines capable of the long-range Pacific services connecting New Zealand with North America and Asia. A request was made to the government for the funds required for the purchase of three of the long-range jets, and the request was approved in 1962. Meanwhile, TEAL officially became Air New Zealand on 1st of April 1965. The first TEAL Air New Zealand DC-8 had been rolled out of the production facility in December 1964 and was painted in the teal livery, but minus the titles, which were duly painted on in time. Early in 1968, two more DC-8s were ordered and they arrived during that year. The airline purchased a further two second-hand machines from the United Airlines in November 1970 and October 1971. The DC-8 remained in frontline service until the late 70s and early 80s, when larger aircraft such as the DC-10 and Boeing 747 gradually took over their long-haul routes. Air New Zealand had the Series 52 DC-8s, which were the standard long-range passenger versions of the initial DC-8 production run. In Air New Zealand configuration, they sat around 142 passengers, flew 5,200 nautical miles, and had a maximum takeoff weight of 315,000 pounds. They also had a DC-8 Series 54F freighter, which had the maximum takeoff weight of the 52 series, but a slightly lighter typical range on account of their higher payload. The fleet was powered by Pratt & Whitney JT3D-3B turbofan engines. The JT3D was a development of the JT3C axial-flow turbojet and was first run in 1958, first flown in 1959, and was one of the first turbofan engines to enter service following the Rolls-Royce Conway. ZK-NZA was the first of the three jets ordered by TEAL in 1962. It was built at Long Beach and rolled out on 16 December 1964, making its first flight there on Sunday 14 February 1965. Since the jet was built during the transition from TEAL to Air New Zealand, it was rolled out painted in the TEAL livery, but minus the titles. NZA was accepted at the plant on 19 July 1965, by which point Air New Zealand had been painted onto the plane. It arrived at Auckland Airport on the completion of its delivery flight on Tuesday, 20 July 1965. In 1969, the aircraft was leased to KLM Royal Dutch Airlines and was partially repainted into the basic KLM livery, where it flew as PH-ADA, before being returned to Air New Zealand and restored to the ZK-NZA registration in September 1969. NZA was withdrawn from use by Air New Zealand in January 1977 and sold to Evergreen International Airlines, delivered to them on 24 January 1977 and registered there as N801EV. The plane later flew for Northeastern International Airways from 1st of March 1982. NZA was withdrawn from service and stored at Marana, Arizona from February 15, 1984, where it was scrapped in the early 1990s. ZK-NZB was built at the Douglas factory at Long Beach and first flown there on 13 July 1965 and was accepted by Air New Zealand on 10 August 1965. It was the second of the first batch of three ordered by TEAL. It arrived at Auckland Airport on the completion of its delivery flight on Thursday, 12 August 1965. NZB operated Air New Zealand's first revenue service from Christchurch Airport, flying across to Sydney on Sunday, 3 October 1965. However, less than a year into passenger service, the airplane was tragically lost in a takeoff accident at Auckland Airport. On Monday, 4 July 1966, ZK-NZB crashed during takeoff on what was to be a 2-hour training flight within the Auckland TMA. The aircraft was destroyed and 2 of the 5 people on board were killed. The accident occurred during the first takeoff of a routine crew training flight and as such had a complement of 5 people. They were Pilot in Command Captain Donald McLaughlin, age 46, Flight Engineer Officer Gordon Tonkin, aged 33, and First Officer Brian Ruffle, aged 29, who was undergoing training in the left seat. Captain Bernard Wyatt and First Officer Kenneth Sawyer were supernumerary crew with no specific duties. The cause of the accident was found to be the incurrence of reverse thrust during a simulated engine failure of the No. 4 right-hand engine during takeoff. The incurrence was due to the rapid rearward movement of the No. 4 power lever, inertial force of which engaged the associated thrust brake lever, which opened the reverse thrust vanes on the engine, exacerbating the asymmetric thrust condition. This meant that, on rotation, airspeed was insufficient to overcome the thrust imbalance, and an uncontrollable roll and sideslip ensued. There was insufficient height to recover the airplane from the unusual attitude before it struck the ground. Captain McLaughlin and Flight Engineer Officer Tonkin were killed in the accident. ZK-NZC was built at the Long Beach plant and first flown there on 13 July 1965 and accepted new by Air New Zealand on 17 September that year. It was the last of the 3 planes ordered from that first batch. It arrived at Auckland Airport on the completion of its delivery flight on Wednesday 22 September 1965. While flying for Air New Zealand, NZC operated the airline's first DC-8 revenue service from Wellington on Tuesday 27 July 1971. It also operated the Royal Flight from Rarotonga to Christchurch on Wednesday 30 January 1974. The aircraft carried Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II and Princess Anne, who were attending the closing ceremony of the Commonwealth Games that were being held in Christchurch. NZC continued in service with the airline before being withdrawn from use in December 1981. After retirement from Air New Zealand, NZC embarked on a long and complex second career. It flew for Crown Air in Canada as CFCRN, Fossett Peru as OB1421, and was converted to a freighter and redesignated as a Douglas DC-8 52F and entered the Colombian aircraft register as HK3974X in December 1994 and leased to Sanair Colombia. During service with Sanair, NZC was impounded by the US Drug Enforcement Agency at Opa-locka, Florida on December 22, 1994. It remained in enforced storage at Opa-locka until its release to FB Air Incorporated in December 1996. Following release, it went to TCB Brazil as PPTPC in January 1997 and was named Daniel. Daniel was sold to Daedalus International Holdings Incorporated of Panama City on 4 May 2001. It was withdrawn from service and placed in open storage at Manaus, Brazil in 2005 and was observed there in 2019 in a poor condition. ZK-NZD was the first of a second batch of DC-8s ordered by Air New Zealand. First flown from the Douglas plant at Long Beach on November 20, 1967, was accepted there by Air New Zealand in January 1968. It arrived at Auckland Airport on the completion of its delivery flight on Monday 29 January 1968 and flew with Air New Zealand in passenger service until March 1981, when it was withdrawn for conversion to full freight configuration and continued operating for Air New Zealand in that capacity. NZD participated in the Singapore to Christchurch air race, arriving in Christchurch on Sunday 29 March 1987. The aircraft finished second with a flight time of 8 hours 27 minutes, aided by a tailwind of around 100 knots. In 1989, the plane was sold to Connie Coletta Services of Detroit, United States, and entered the US register as N806CK on 30 August 1989. NZD was withdrawn from service in February 1999 and was observed stored at Oscar, Michigan, April 2000, where it was slowly being broken up for parts. ZK-NZD was first flown from Long Beach on 11 January 1968 and was accepted there by Air New Zealand shortly afterwards. It arrived at Auckland Airport on the completion of its delivery flight on Wednesday 28 February 1968. It operated the final Air New Zealand DC-8 passenger service to Wellington Airport, the Brisbane to Wellington run, on Thursday 31 December 1981. Following service with Air New Zealand, NZD was sold to Howard Golden of New York City in July 1982 as N4292P. It was stored at Palm Springs in California before being located to Marana, Arizona, and appeared to spend a long time in storage at these locations. It was sold to FB Air Incorporated, Miami, Florida in October 1987 and leased to Ports of Call, Canada on December 23, 1987. NZD was then leased to Fiesta Holidays Limited, Canada in January 1990 and then Wayfarer Holidays Limited in February 1991, but was repossessed by FB Air shortly after. Later that year, the plane was leased by Peruvian Fossett Peru and was returned at the end of the lease in November 1992. It was cancelled from the Peruvian register and re-registered in the United States as N223FB and placed in open storage at Opa-locka, Florida for the next 2 years. It was then leased to LAC Colombia in January 1994 for 2 years and registered there as HK 3842X before being returned to FB Air in 1996. The aircraft was placed in open storage at Miami International Airport in July 1996 and used for spare parts, and by August 1998 had been completely scrapped. ZK-NZF was built at Long Beach in 1961 and first flown there on 14 April. NZF was originally delivered to United Airlines as N8036U on 8 June 1961. Air New Zealand leased the aircraft from United, taking delivery on 1 November 1970. Like the other DC-8 52s, it was powered by 4 JT3D-3B turbofans. It was operated by Air New Zealand for 2 months in the United States registration and entered the New Zealand registration as ZK-NZF on 30 October 1970. It entered service with Air New Zealand in the standard livery and was sold to the company the following year on 2 June 1971. Following service with Air New Zealand, NZF was withdrawn from use at Auckland on 20 March 1976 and was sold to McDonnell Douglas of Long Beach, where it entered the United States Register as N99862. It was then leased to Cyprus Airways on 30 March 1976. During service with Cyprus Airways, the aircraft was involved in a hostage incident at Cyprus on Saturday, 18 February 1978. The ex-Air New Zealand DC-8 jet was hijacked at Larnaca International Airport in Cyprus by Palestinian extremists who had attacked a convention in the city and taken several moderate Arab leaders hostage. The extremists demanded to be flown to Palestine, but after taking off, permission to land in Palestine, Djibouti, Syria or Saudi Arabia was denied, and the jet was forced to return and land in Cyprus a few hours later. The plane was then surrounded by Cypriot special forces. Meanwhile, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat ordered commandos to be flown to Cyprus in an Air Force Hercules with the stated aim to help release the hostages. It landed and parked near the ex-Air New Zealand jet. The commandos then engaged the Cypriot forces in gunfire. The Egyptian Hercules was fired upon by cannon and destroyed. Subsequently, Cyprus and Egypt cut off diplomatic relations until 1981, and it was revealed later that the hostages on the plane had already been surrendered by the time of the Egyptian attack. NZF was returned to McDonnell Douglas at the end of that lease, the following week on March 1, 1978. At the end of the lease, NZF was sold by McDonnell Douglas to Evergreen International Airways, Marana, Arizona on September 2, 1978, where it was registered N804EV. It was then leased to them by Libyan Arab Airlines towards the end of 1979, returned a few times before being withdrawn from service and placed in open storage at Marana, Arizona in January 1984, where it was slowly parted out. ZK-NZG was the second-hand DC-8 for Air New Zealand and first flew on 16 February 1961. It spent the first 10 years of its career until 1971 with United Airlines of Chicago, Illinois as N8034U. The aircraft was withdrawn from service and prepared for sale to Air New Zealand in September 1971, and it arrived at Auckland Airport on the completion of its ferry flight from the United States on Saturday, 23 October 1971. Following service with Air New Zealand, the aircraft was prepared for sale to Evergreen International Airways, where it entered the United States Register as N800EV on October 21, 1976. NZG was leased to Libyan Arab Airlines on October 3, 1979, and then to Overseas National Airways on June 3, 1980. NZG was then leased to Northeastern International Airways of Scranton, Pennsylvania on January 20, 1982, and returned in February 1984, when it was stored at Marana, Arizona. It was withdrawn from use and gradually reduced to spares. By the late 1970s, the DC-8s were nearing the end of their frontline service lives. Wide-body airliners such as the DC-10 and Boeing 747 offered greater capacity and were more economical on long-range routes simply by dint of their being able to fly direct to Los Angeles instead of refueling stops in the islands on the way. Air New Zealand gradually withdrew its DC-8 fleet through the early 1990s, with most aircraft sold or leased overseas, where they continued working, often for decades, as freighters or charter aircraft. The type left Air New Zealand service entirely by the mid-1980s, closing the chapter on the aircraft that introduced New Zealand to the jet age. The DC-8 remains one of the airline's most historically significant fleet. It was the aircraft that shrank the Pacific and linked New Zealand to the wider world.